We begin the Gemara today on Daf Tesam Beis, the last line on the Amud where it says Ahu Shtara. The Gemara before was discussing the different dates that they used in writing documents in the times of Chazal. So there was a date that they would use from when the Greek Empire began. And the Gemara said before that the Greek Empire began 380 years before the Churban. Even though really the Greek Empire began 6 years even before that, but as the Gemara said before, originally Rashi explained, and this is we'll see over here in the Gemara, originally they only conquered a certain area in the world. And then their full dominance over the world was 6 years later, which was 380 years before the Churban. And somehow it became the custom that they wrote the dates in the Shtaris starting from that time. Okay, so now in connection to this, the Gemara brings the following halacha. Hahu Shtara, there was this star, the Haviksiv Beishis Shnin Yiserte, where in the star it was written a date which was 6 years after the time that they were standing in. It was a star that was post-dated 6 years. So what's the halacha with a post-dated star? So Savar Rabbana Kameh, the Rav or Rav Nachman Lemeimar, the Chachamim that were sitting in front of Rav Nachman or Rava thought to say about the star that Hai Star Mu'ucherhu, that it's a star which is post-dated, and therefore such a kind of star, a post-dated star, is actually a kosher star. But there's a detail about this, and that is Na'akve Adamatye Zimne V'loy Tarif. Because it's post-dated, so the lender can't confiscate from properties that the borrower already sold to someone until this date. In other words, usually the halacha by every star is when you come to collect a loan, so you can confiscate any properties that the borrower owned, even what the borrower already sold, because it was a lien on this property from the time of the loan, and therefore even if you sold it, you could confiscate it, mishubadim. But in this case where it's post-dated, what does it mean that it was post-dated? That the lender was sort of doing a favor to the borrower and saying, until that date in the star, whatever properties you sell, I can't confiscate. So that's the case with the shtar. It's post-dated 6 years. So any property sold in those 6 years, this lender will not be able to confiscate. Okay, so now, Rav Nachman said to those chachamim that were sitting in front of him, I don't think it's post-dated. Rather, Hai Safre Dukne Kasve. This shtar, a scribe which is very exact in the date that he writes, that's the kind of scribe that wrote this. Now, so when you see over here that it's post-dated 6 years, what does this mean? These 6 added years is because, as I mentioned, they would write the star with the date from when the Greek Empire began. And this Sefer, so he's writing the star, and he began the date from 6 years before. Because the Greek Empire, they began conquering the world. They began first their kingdom in Elam. And so we don't count those 6 years. But he is counting those 6 years as well. So therefore, he begins 6 years earlier. So when you see the star, it's not post-dated 6 years. It's the date is actually now. So it's a regular star for now. So Rashi explains here, it's not mistaver to say that a person, a lender, would post-date, allow a borrower to post-date the star. Why would he want to take away from himself the option to collect from these properties? So therefore, it's more logical to say that it was a star that was written with the exact date. Elamai, he used a date of 6 years earlier. And Rav Nachman is relying on this svara that he's saying to be mitzi mami. It's a big chiddush. Usually the Gemara says when you have any doubt in how to interpret a star, the rule is yad bal shtar al tachtain. The person holding the star will have to prove what the star means to give him the ability to collect. But Rav Nachman says it's logical to say that this is what happened. Now, the Gemara brings a source for this. The Tanya Rabbi Yossi said, Sheishana Molcho Be'elam, that the Greek Empire, so they began first, they ruled in the place of Elam, and only later, 6 years later, did they spread in the entire world. Okay, so that's what Rav Nachman suggested to say, and that therefore you can use the star like a regular star to collect right now with it. Maskav Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, now Rav Acha Bar Yaakov asks on this, maybe the date on the star is actually something completely different. How do you know that the dates that is used in the star were counting from the beginning of the Greek Empire? Maybe really the time that we're counting from is from the beginning of when Yidden left Mitzrayim. Doesn't that make much more sense to say that the dates that we're writing begins from Yitzias Mitzrayim? You're going to ask the question, Yitzias Mitzrayim is so many years before. How could it be that the date written in the star is connected to Yetzias Mitzrayim? So here the Gemara points out an interesting thing. Yetzias Mitzrayim was exactly 1,000 years before the Greek Empire began. And therefore we could say, V'shafke la'alfa kama, so that 1,000 years is not written explicitly in the date, and v'nakte alpha basra, and you begin writing from the next 1,000 years without mentioning that 1,000 years already passed from Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's similar the way we write the date today. When we write the date today in Lashon Kodesh from Bria Sa'ilam, so you'll write Tavshin Pei Hey. You're not going to write Hey Alofim Tavshin Pei Hey. The 1,000 years that you drop, you write Tavshin Pei Hey. So the same thing here. He says that 380 years before the Churban is exactly 1,000 years from Yetzias Mitzrayim. So it could be that the date that's written here is exactly from that time, because really we're counting from Yetzias Mitzrayim. And therefore, what's the point that Rav Acha Bar Yaakov is asking? And we could still say that V'hai Me'ucher that since we see that the shtar is post-dated 60 years, so it is a shtar Me'ucher. So how do you say that it's a shtar that's written to the Greek Empire? And then you could say that the one that wrote the shtar wrote it from a date from 6 years before, because the Greek Empire began from 6 years before. No, maybe it's being written from Yetzias Mitzrayim. And therefore, it actually does begin from that time when the Greek Empire began 380 years before the Churban, and therefore it still is a post-dated shtar. Rashi here makes the cheshbon of the years, of how it's exactly 1,000 years. If you count the 480 years from Yetzias Mitzrayim until when the first Beis HaMikdash was built, then the 410 years of the Beis HaMikdash, the 70 years of Golas Bavel, and the second Beis HaMikdash was for 420 years, that's exactly 1380. So 380 years before the Churban of the second Beis HaMikdash, when the Greek Empire began, is exactly 1,000 years from Yetzias Mitzrayim. So Rav Nachman answered him and said, no, this is not true. Because B'goyle eimoinen ela lemalchi Yevonim bilvad. We know that when Yidden are in Golus, they do not count from Yetzias Mitzrayim, but the dates that were written in the Shtaris, they wrote the dates from Malchus Yevonim, from the Greek Empire. Now, who saw the Chuy Kamat Chilei? Rav Acha Bar Yaakov thought that Rav Nachman is just pushing him off, and he's saying that this is the way it is without having a proper source. And as I mentioned before, there is a svara to say this, because why would a lender write a post-dated shtar? So it would make more sense to say that he used the dates of the Greek Empire from when it began, when they were ruled in Elam, and therefore it's not a post-dated shtar. But then Nofak Dok Va'ashkach, he went out and he found a brayso that says this clearly. The Tanya, the brayso says, "Bagoila eimoinen el malchi Yevonim bilvad," that when Yidden are in Golus, the dates that they write in the documents, they count from the time of the Greek Empire. And now here the Gemara also brings a raya from a Mishnah in the beginning of Rosh Hashanah. Omer Ravina said, "Masnisin nami deike." I can prove this from you, from the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, "Ve'echad b'Nisan Rosh Hashanah l'malachim u'l'regalim." The first day of Nisan, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, is considered to be a Rosh Hashanah for kings and for the Yomim Tovim. Regarding the Yomim Tovim, the Gemara explains there in Rosh Hashanah what the relevance of that is. But what does L'malachim mean? V'amrinon. L'malachim, l'mai hilchase. What does it mean that it's a Rosh Hashanah for kings? Rav Chizda explained, l'shtaris. When they write the date in the documents, and they're writing the date based on the kingdom, or whatever empire is ruling then in that time in the world, so at the time of Nisan, that's when the year changes. You don't go by the actual date that the king became king, but Nisan is considered to be the second year of his kingdom, even if he just became a king a week before. So that's what it's relevant for. That's the taich of Malachim. And then Utanan, in that same Mishnah, it goes on to say, that it's an Echad Tishrei, on Rosh Hashanah. That is the beginning of the year for Shanim and for Shmitten, when Shmitten begins. Now, on this it was said, L'shanim l'mai hilchaseh, when it says that it's the beginning of the new year, for the year. What is for the year? For what's the relevance of this? On this as well, Rav Chizda said, L'shtaris, also that it refers to shtaris, that when you write the date on shtaris for the king that's ruling at that time, so the year of the king changes by Rosh Hashanah, by Aleph Tishrei and Rosh Hashanah. So now, and on this the question is, Kashye shtaris ahadodi. So there's a contradiction over here regarding the date of the shtaris. When is the beginning of the new year regarding the date of the shtaris? The beginning of the Mishnah says Malachim. He says that the beginning is Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and then it says that it's Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. And the answer that the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah is Kan l'Malchi Yisrael. For Malchi Yisrael, if we're counting and writing a date in a star for a Yiddish king, so then it begins from Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And Kal Malchi Oivdi Kechavim. When it comes to the Oivdi Kechavim, so then it begins, as Gemara says, Malchi Oivdi Kechavim Mitishter Manina. For a Goyish king, so the year changes, you count from Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. And L'malchi Yisrael Nisan Manina. For a Yiddish king, the year changes, you count from Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So now, this is all the discussion regarding and the explanation of the Gemara and Rosh Hashanah for the first Mishnah in Masechta Rosh Hashanah. So now, the Rav Vinay explains how we see that today we're counting from the Greek Empire and not from Yetzias Mitzrayim. Because Vanan Hashtim et Tishrei Manina. We see that today, when we count the number of the year in the Shtaris, from when are we counting? From Tishrei, from Rosh Hashanah and Tishrei. Now, if you would say that the date that we write in Shtaris is from Yetzias Mitzrayim and not from the Greek Empire, so we should be counting from Nisan. Even though Yetzias Mitzrayim is not a date connected to a Yiddish king, but it's connected to Yetzias Mitzrayim. Definitely, the time to count the years from Yetzias Mitzrayim, the year changes from Nisan, when the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim, not from Tishrei. So, the fact that we count and the year changes from the time of Tishrei regarding the date in the star, Shema Mino Malchi Yevonim Aninon. So it means that we count from the Greek Empire, Shema Mino. This is a proof to this, that's how the Shtaris are written, and that's the date that's used. This date was used in the Shtaris for many, many years. I believe it says that towards the end of the Zman of the Rishayim, they weren't anymore so proficient in this date, and the Rishayim were mevatel it, and they stopped using this date. But until that time period, they were using that date in the star. Okay, going back to what it said in the Mishnah, V'yoyin, take a picture, or you can. Okay. Sagt the Gemara, V'yoyin genusya shal malcheim v'chulu. It said in the Mishnah that there's a yoyim genusya of the kings. So that is also considered to be a day that is a holiday, and they serve idols, and you should not do business dealings with a guy at that time. Says the Gemara, what does this word mean? Genusya. Rav Yehuda answers, it's the day that the Goyim inaugurate or they appoint their king. And that's the day that they celebrate, and you shouldn't do business with them. In fact, the Gemara about Vatanya and Abraisa, we learned Yom Genusya. And then it says, the day that they appoint their king. So we see that Yom Genusya is not that day. And says the Gemara like Kasha, it's not a question. Ha di day, this is when the king himself is appointed. And ha de brei, when a king sees the day, on the day that he establishes that his son will take him over, and they appoint him to be a king. So that's the day that it says Mamidim Bayis Malkam. So fact the Gemara, but how could you say that that's the pshat? That there's the king himself, and there's the day when the king's son is being appointed to take over. But can this be that by the Roman Empire, this is all the holidays that the Mishnah speaks about is regarding the Roman Empire. So could it be that by the Roman Empire that a son takes over his father to be the emperor or the Caesar? Rav Yosef taught, it says in the pasuk in Ekatana Saticha Bagoyim that you are small by the nations. What does this mean? She'ein Meshivin Melech ben Melech. What this means is that by them, the pasuk says they will not be able to appoint a son to take over his father to be a king. Another pasuk says, Bazayatam you are very disgraced. She'ein Lehen, why is the Roman Empire, why are they disgraced? Because She'ein Lehem Loik Sav Loy Loshen. They don't have any of their own language or their own writing. As Rashi here says that their writing, their language came from the Greeks, from the Yevonim, or from Latin. They did not create their own. It's not their own language. Ashi over here brings. You have over here actually in the side of the page over here in the Avoda Gemaras from a Rashi that was taken out that describes over here where they got their language and their writing from. They did not have it on their own. So therefore, they're considered to be a disgraced nation in that sense. But the point is, you see over here that by the Romans, a son does not replace his father for the kingdom. So how could you say that over here, the Mamidim by Melech means that the son takes over his father? Ella, the Gemara tries another pshat. Ma Yom Genusya, what does the Yom Genusya mean? Yom Aleida, the birthday of the king. But the Gemara, that can't be either, because of Tanya and Abraisa we learned Yom Genusya, and then there's Yom Aleida, the birthday of the king. So the Gemara tries, Loi Kashi, it's not a question, Hadi Day, the birthday of the king himself, that's the Yom Genusya, and Hadi Brei, the birthday of the son. Fragt the Gemara, but Vatanya and a Braisa we clearly learned as follows. There's Yom Genusia Shaloi and Yom Genusia Shal Benoi. So that is his Yom Genusia and the Yom Genusia of the son. And then there's Yom Aleida Shaloi, the birthday of the king, and the Yom Aleida Shal Benoi, and the birthday of his son. And these are all holidays. So we see that you can't say the pshat that we're saying over here. It's not. You can't say that it refers to his birthday, and it says clearly separately that there's his Yom Genusia, son's Yom Genusia, his birthday, son's birthday. So Ella, the Gemara goes back to the pshat that I suggested in the beginning. Ma Yom Genusia, Yom Shemamidim by Malkam. Yom Genusia does mean the day that the king is appointed. Now, V'loi Kasha, and it's not a question with what we asked before, that it says that there's in the Braisa clearly that Yom Shemamidim by Malkam, because as we already answered before, Hadi Day Hadibrei. There's the day that the king himself is appointed, and then there's the day that his son is appointed to take him over as a king. And the question that we asked before, that by the Romans, the Pasuk says that they will not be able to appoint their son to be a king. So the Gemara answers, there's an exception. By a special request, naturally, the son will not take over. But by a special request, the son can take over his father. And for this, the Gemara brings an example where we find this, and this will take us into the famous stories about Antoninus. And the example for this is Asvirus bar Antoninus. Asvirus, which was the son of the Roman Caesar Antoninus. The Malach, he was the king. And now what happened was, Amale Antoninus le Rebbe, Antoninus said to Rebbe, as the Gemara is going to bring soon the story, that Antoninus was very close to Rebbe and he learned Torah with him. Be'ina the Yimlech Asvirus beri techaisi. I want my son Asvirus to be king instead of me. That's one thing he wanted. In other words, this wasn't usual, but he wanted to make a special request for this. And also, v'tisavid Tverye Kalanya. And he wants the city of Tverye, that is, where Rebbe lived and the Talmidei Chachamim lived, he wants it to become Klanya. Klanya means it should be free of any taxes. Chachamim should not have to pay taxes. The Gemara says in a few places that Talmidei Chachamim don't have to pay taxes. And he wanted to establish this for the city of Tverye. Right? Antoninus learned Torah. He valued the Talmidei Chachamim. But he says to Rebbe, if I will say to my ministers and I'll make one request, they will grant it to me. But if I'll make two requests, they're not going to fulfill both requests. So what should I do? So Rebbe, instead of answering him directly, Rebbe did the following. I see Gavra. Rebbe brought a person. He had this person ride and go on top of the shoulders of his friend. And then he gave the person that's riding on his shoulders to hold a dove in his hand. And Rebbe says to the person that's in the bottom, tell a person that's on your shoulders, that he should let the dove fly out of his hands. That's what Rebbe demonstrated in front of Antoninus. So now Antoninus was trying to understand what's going on over here. What's this little skit that he's making in front of him? So Omar, Antoninus understood the message, and he said, Shashmami no, from this I understand that Hachik Amali. This is what Rebbe is telling me. At boy minayu, you should ask one request from them. That my son Asvirus should take my place. And then once Asvirus is going to be the Roman Caesar, and then you can say to Asvirus, the Tisavit Tvarya Kalanya. And he's able to free the city of Klanya from paying taxes. Like it is in this example that the person on top is riding on you and he's the one that has the control. He's holding the dove in his hands. Over here also, have your son ride on top of you. And he'll be the Roman Caesar. And then you'll tell your son that's already riding above, that he should free and he should let go of the Chachamim in Tverye. They shouldn't have to pay the taxes. Another incident that happened, Amalei, Antoninus says to Rebbe, Mitzaren li chashuvi remoy. The prominent people in the ministers of the Romans, they're annoying me, they're giving me a lot of pain and suffering. So Rabbi again did not answer him, but Rabbi did something that's demonstrated to him the answer. He would go with Antoninus into his garden every day, and he uprooted one radish from the field, just one radish he uprooted. So he was wondering, Antoninus was wondering, what is he demonstrating with this? Omar, Antoninus figured it out. He said, Shmami no, from this I understand, Hachik Amali, this is what he's telling me. At ketel chad minayu, you can kill one at a time. But do not try to kill many at once, because then you're going to antagonize them and they'll gang up against you to rebel against you. But you can kill one at a time. That's what you should do. Okay, so the Mefarshim say over here on this, that how is he allowed to kill them? Because they were really antagonizing him and he was afraid of them. So Rabbi tells him this is how you can eliminate them one at a time. Okay, so the Gemara asks about both of these incidents. V'lei malei meimer. Why didn't Rebbe respond to Antoninus and give him a clear answer for both of these questions that he asked? So the answer is, says the Gemara, Omar, he said, Shami chashuvi roimi u'mitzarilei, that the prominent people of Rome will hear the questions of Antoninus and they'll hear what Rebbe answered, and then Rebbe will be in trouble. In fact, the Gemara, why? Rebbe could answer quietly, and they won't know that Rebbe gave this advice. Answers the Gemara, that doesn't work. The birds from heaven, they bring the voice, and whatever you say, even quietly, will be brought to them, and it'll be dangerous. Some actually say this refers to Shin Daled, it refers to different ways how once you say something, it gets out there. Another story with Rebbe and Antoninus, where you see that they sort of had a conversation without saying a word, just by making hints to each other. So Antoninus had a daughter, the Shema Gira. Her name was Gira. Ka'avda Isura. His daughter Gira went and did a forbidden thing. So Rashi says she was mizanish, she had a forbidden relationship. So Antoninus was very upset about this. He wanted to know what he should do with his daughter. So Shadalei Gargira, he sent to Rebbe this vegetable or a herb that's called Gargira. And this is hinted to Rebbe, and Rebbe understood what is this Gargira. It has in it a hint as follows. First of all, it's his name, his daughter Gira is in this vegetable. And also Gar Gira, Rashi says, means ligrer, which means when one is being dragged, one is being schlepped away from the proper path. And he hinted to Rebbe that my daughter strayed from the proper path and did such a kind of thing. What should I do with my daughter? So Rebbe didn't answer clearly, but he sent back a different vegetable. Shadale kuzbarta. He sends him a kuzbarta, whatever that is. And what did Antoninus understand from this? What does kuzbarta mean? It's a combination of two words, kus brata. Kus means slaughter, and brata means a daughter, which means your daughter is chayiv misa for what she did. So the Mefarshim discussed this, why exactly she was chayiv misa. It would have to be that she was mizana when she was an Esher Sish, and she's chayiv misa. So now what happened? Shadale karti. Antoninus sent back a karti. A karti is a leek. That we know what a karti is. So what was the message that he was saying with this leak that he sent back? The karti was telling Rebbe, you're telling me to kill my daughter, but then this will be kadis. That will mean that I'll have no descendants, because I'm going to be killing my daughter. So the Mefarshim say it must be that this story happened before his son, Azvirus, that was mentioned before, was born. So Shalach Alei, so when Rebbe heard that, so Rebbe sent him back chasa. He sent him back chasa, which I believe is the lettuce. Chasa is the mother, the lettuce. Which means chasa means you could have mercy on her, and you could spare her. So here you see the conversation they were having. Rebbe did not want to say a word, but they were having a conversation with sending vegetables to one another. Okay. Now another thing, kol yoyme, every day, have a shadale da have a priche. Antoninus sent to Rebbe these pieces of gold b'matrosa in this leather sack. But in order that the ones that are delivering it should not notice what's inside, v'chitia pomayu, there was wheat that was on the top of it. Amaluhu, and he told his servants, Amtiyu chiti leRebbe, deliver this wheat to Rebbe. Now Amalei Rebbe said to Antoninus, Lo yitzrichna, you're sending me this, I don't need this. Isli tuv, I have already a lot. So Omar, Antoninus says to Rebbe that take it, because in the future this would come to use. Lahevi lamanda basreich, this will be available for the ones that come after you, your children, the Yehavi lebasroi, that they should have available what to give if they have to the ones that will come after me. The asu basrach, or the asu minayo, the ones that come after you, and then even their children, the ones that will be descendants of them, neipe kalayo, they'll have what to pay for if they're going to be charged taxes. So in other words, now Antoninus is the Caesar, and the Yidden have it in very good times, and they don't have to pay taxes and so on. But what will happen in the next generation or in another generation after that? They may need all this gold and this money to pay a lot of taxes. So therefore, take it and keep it. Now, the relationship between Rebbe and Antoninus here is a famous story about how they used to learn Torah with each other. It says the Gemara, Havale Ahi Nekrasa, there was this cave, this tunnel, the Hava Eilim Mibeise Lebeis Rebbe, that was going from the house of Antoninus to the house of Rebbe. So there was a certain time period, there's a discussion in Mefarshim when this was, because really Antoninus was living in Rome, and Rebbe was living in Tveria or in Tzipori, in Eretz Yisrael. But there was a certain time period where Antoninus was in Eretz Yisrael, living there near Rebbe. It was time when they were conquering different places, and he was there near Rebbe, and there was a tunnel between his house and Rebbe's house. Kol Yom, every day, have a Maisitre Avdi. He would come and he would bring along with him 2 of his servants to go into this cave to Rebbe's house. Chad, now one of these servants, Kotlei above the Rebbe. When he came to the door to the house of Rebbe, so he killed one of these servants that he should not come back with him to report where he's going. So, but then V'chad, another one he kept alive, and Kotlei above the Beise. And he killed him when he came back home. When he was coming back to his house, on the door of his house, he killed him. So he should not report to anybody where he was. Yeah. Taisus over here actually addresses, how could he kill 2 slaves every day? How is this possible? So Taisus has 2 pshatim. Either one pshat, Taisus says, like I mentioned before, Habar lahagar, chashkim lahargai. He knew these slaves, these servants that are with him, if he's going to keep them alive, they're definitely going to report to everybody what Antoninus did, and they're going to kill him. So Habar lahagar, chashkim lahargai is allowed. Another pshat Taisus says is, he l'chatchila choose such servants that were chayiv misa anyways for another reason. And therefore, this is when he gave them their chayiv misa, that they were chayiv anyways for another reason.
Why took him Hatila?
Again?
Why took them?
A king can't go alone. A king always has to go with servants. Amalei, so Antoninus says to Rebbe, Be'idne da'asine, when I come to learn with you, le'nishkach gave kamach. I don't want anybody else to be there, so nobody should know about this. Now, Yom Echad, one day he came to learn with Rebbe, and Ashkachni Rab Chanina bar Chama Davi Yosef, and he sees Rab Chanina bar Chama is sitting by Rebbe. Omar, Antoninus said, Lo yaminulach, didn't I tell you, Be'idne da'asine le'nishkach gave kamach, that when I come, nobody else should be found there? Amalei, so Rebbe says about him, Les Dein Bar Nash. He's not a human being. He's a malach. He's on a different level. So Antoninus wanted to see if this is true. So Amalei, he says to him, or Amalei, say to him, Lahu Avde, say to this servant of mine, the Gani above. He's sleeping a very deep sleep outside of the door of the house of Rebbe. Tell him the Kohen V'leizel Vasi. Let him wake up. Wake him up and bring him here. Okay, this was the servant that he killed outside. He wanted to see what's going to happen. He's sending Rab Chanina bar Chama to wake him up. So what happened? Azal Rab Chanina bar Chama. Rab Chanina bar Chama went Ashkechei, and he finds this servant of his, the avocado that he's killed. So what is he going to do? He didn't realize that Antoninus killed him. He said to himself, Heichi Avad, what should I do? Should I go inside and tell Antoninus that he was killed? I don't want to do that, because it says, Ein Mashivan al Kalkola. When you go and you're sent on a shlichus, on a mission, you shouldn't be the one to come back and deliver bad news. Ashvekei ve'ezel, should I just leave him and go away? Kamazalzina b'malchusa. So then I'm being mezalzel and the king. He told me that I should bring him, I should come back. How can I just leave? So boy rachmi alei, he davened for him, and vache, he was machayim mesim, and v'shadre, and he sent him inside to Rebbe. So now, and Antoninus. So Amar Antoninus said, so Yedaina. So now I know that Zuti de'espechu, even the smallest amongst you students, Machayim Mesim. He could be Machayim Mesim. But he still asked, Ve'idne da'asine, when the time when I come to you, Loi nishkach inish kamach. No one should be found in front of you. This is, he used to learn Torah with Rebbe every day. There's a discussion about this in the Farshim, how he was allowed to learn Torah with Rebbe. A guy shalom Torah is chayiv misa, he shouldn't learn Torah with him. So in other places it actually says that Antoninus was Megayer. But over here, from the continuation of the Gemara, it's mashma that he was not Megayer. So if that's the case, the Mefarshim say that he learned with him all the halachas of Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, which a guy is allowed to learn. Or in this case, Rebbe had no choice. Antoninus, the Roman Caesar, demanded of him that he should learn Torah with him, so he had to learn Torah with him. So Kol Yoyim Ahava Mishamish LeRebbe, every day he was serving Rebbe. Not only learned Torah with him, but he was serving Rebbe. Maichale, Mashkale, gave him to eat and to drink. Kavaboy Rebbe Lemeisik Lepuri, when Rebbe wanted to go up onto his bed, have a Gochen Kameh, he bent down in front of him, or Kameh Puri in front of the bed, that Rebbe should use him as a stool or to go up onto his bed. Yeah. Amalei, and he said to Rebbe, Saki lavoy lepuriach, go on top of me to get onto your bed. So Amar Rebbe said, Lav oirech ara lezulzula b'malchusa kula. Hi, it's not customary to treat a king so disgracefully like this that I should go onto you. So Amar Antonina said, Mi isimeni matzah tachtecha la'olam haba. Who will give that I will be in front of you like a sheet that's spread out that I could serve you in olam haba? So he wanted to serve Rebbe today, in order that it'll be zeicha to serve Rebbe in Olam Haba. For Sheming it says in Gemara in Ksubis that Rebbe said this, the ones that served him in today in Olam Hazeh will be there to serve him also in Olam Haba. So Amalei, when Antoninus heard this, he asked Rebbe, Asina la'amad asi, am I going to be zeicha to be there in Olam Haba? Amalei, so Antoninus says yes. Sorry, Rebbe that is. Rebbe says to him, yes, you will be there in Olam Haba. Amalei, so Antonina says, but how could it be that I will be with you? V'haksiv, the pasuk says, La'yeh started lebeis Esav. There will not be any remnant from the house of Esav. So he was a Roman Caesar, and the Romans come from Esav, so he's not going to be there, lost love. So Rabbi told him, Ba'oise maise Esav. That's only if they behave like Esav. Tanya nami haches, we learned also in a brayso, La'yeh started lebeis Esav, Yochel l'chol. I think it includes anybody that comes from Esav, Tamalayma lebeis Esav, which means only ba'oise maise Esav, only one that acts like those in the house of Esav. But Amalei Antoninus asks, but it says in another pasuk, V'aksiv Shama Edoim Malchea V'chol Nisiyahu. There means in Gehenim. In Gehenim is all the kings of Edoim and all of its princes. So I see that I'm going to be in Gehenim and not Losad Lavi and Olam Haba. Amalei, so Rebbe told him, no, it says Malchea, it's kings, but it doesn't call Malchea. It doesn't say all of its kings. In the end of the pasuk it says Kol, but here it doesn't say Kol. And then even when it says Kol Nisiyeha, but v'loy Kol Sareha. All of its princes, but not all of its ministers. So therefore, you could still come at Olam Haba. Tanya Nami Yochi, we learned this in the Braisa as well. It says Malchea v'loy Kol Malchea. It says Kol Nisiyeha v'loy Kol Sareha. So when it says in Malchea v'loy Kol Malchea, so what does it mean to exclude? Prat l'Antoninus ben Asvirus. So therefore we say that Antoninus ben Asvirus, he's not included in what it says here, that the Malchei Edlim are in Gehenim. And when it says Kol Nisiyeha, and it says specifically Nisiyeha, v'loy Kol Sareha, but the ministers are not included in this, which minister of the Romans will be in Olam Haba? So this is Prat l'Ketiya bar Sholem. A minister by the name of Ketiya bar Sholem that will be in Olam Haba. And here the Gemara brings the story about Ketiya bar Sholem. Ketiya bar Sholem, what's the story with Ketiya bar Sholem? Dahu Kaisre, there was a Roman Caesar, Davasoneli Yudai, they hated the Yidden. So Amalol Chashiv de Malchuse, he said to the prominent ministers in his kingdom, what should I do? And he gave the following analogy. A person has dead skin or dead flesh in his feet. What should he do with it? Should he cut it off and then he could live peacefully? Or should he leave it and then he'll constantly have pain? So this was an saying regarding Yidden that they're causing me pain. I don't want the Yidden amongst me. So shouldn't I get rid of them and then I'll have peace? Amru loy, so his advisors answered him, you should amputate it and then you'll live. But now, Amalo Ketiya bar Sholem says to them, after the king and his advisors decided this, so he comes and says, no, you're making a mistake. Number one, the layachlis lakulu. Impossible for you to chas v'shalom annihilate all the Yidden. Because the pasuk says regarding Yidden that ki ka'arba ruches hashemayim perasti eschem. Like the four corners of the world, I have spread them out. Now, my comment, that is, what is the pasuk saying here? Ileme, if you're going to say the pshat in the pasuk is the bedrasrain, bedal drucha, is that they're spread around in the four corners of the world. So then the language of the pasuk is not exact. Hai ke'ar baruchas. Why does it say with the chaf that they're like the four corners of the world? Le'ar baruchas mibayale. It should say that they were spread out to the four corners of the world. Ella, rather what the pasuk is saying is, Kishem shehi efshel la'olam b'loy ruchais, just as it's impossible to have the world to exist without the ruach, without the wind and the oxygen to breathe, kach efshel la'olam b'loy Yisrael. The world cannot exist without Yidden. That's number one. So you can't get rid of the Yidden. And the second point is, Karolacha Malchusa Ketiya. You're going to wipe out a portion of the people in your kingdom, so you'll always be referred to as the Caesar, the king that rules over a broken people because a part of it you got rid of. You'll always be lacking in your kingdom. So Amalei, so the Roman Caesar said to Ketia bar Shalom, Meime Shapeka Omris, what you said is true, and what you said was against my opinion, but nevertheless you're right. But the thing is though, Kol the Zachi Malke, anybody that says something that goes against the king and he actually defeats the king, he proves that he's right. So Shadilele Kamunya Khalila. This individual has to be thrown into this Kamunya Khalila. What's this Kamunya Khalila? It's this room, Rashi says, that's full of earth, that he's thrown in there, and he dies there and he gets buried there. So therefore, he saved the Yidden, but he was Meiser Nefesh because of this. He was taken to be killed. So Kadava Nokten Leva Oslin, when they grabbed him, they were taking him to this room. Amr Lea Humatranisa. There was this prominent woman that said to him, Vaile le Ilfe, the Osle Beloy Michse. Woe to this Ilfa, which means a large ship that goes and it doesn't have the taxes to pay in order to be able to travel through. What was this mashal? What she was saying was that you will meiser nefesh for the Yidden, you have a tremendous merit, and you'll be zeichet to Olam Haba. But the thing is, you won't be able to get through into Olam Haba. Why not? Because you don't have a bris milah. If you don't have a bris milah, you can't come to Olam Haba. So therefore, you have a great schus. You're a large ship, but you didn't pay the taxes. So when he heard this, nafal al reishu the orla say kata. He fell on his head. He fell onto his arla, and he cut off his arla. Some say with a knife he had with him, or even with his teeth. He didn't want. He wanted to have a bris. Omar. So he said, Yavis michsi. I gave my taxes. I paid my taxes. Chalfis v'avris. I could pass through and I can go. I can enter. So Kikashadule, when they were there about to throw him into this room and he was going to die there, Omar, he announced and said, Kol nechsoi, all of my properties should be given to Rabbi Akiva and his friends. So now Yotzer Rabbi Akiva v'Darash, Rabbi Akiva heard this, Rabbi Akiva darshaned and said that, what does it mean when he says Rabbi Akiva and his friends? So he compared it to what it says in the pasuk regarding the lechem aponim. It says v'haya la'aren u'lobanov, that the lechem aponim is divided between Aaron and his children. And what does the Gemara learn out from this? Mechzel Aaron, Aaron gets half, u'mechzel labanov, and half goes to the children. So Rabbi Akiva said here as well, he said he's giving his properties, his possessions to Rabbi Akiva and his friends. That means I get half, and the other half goes to everyone else. So after Ketia bar Shalom was killed and he saved the Yidden, Yotze Baskel v'Omra, a Baskel came out and said, Ketia bar Shalom mizumen l'chai olam haba. Ketia bar Shalom is invited to be in olam haba. And then Bacha Rebbe v'Amar, Rebbe heard about this. Rebbe cried and said, Yesh kaina olamei b'shah achas. There's a person that could acquire an entire world in just one moment. And v'yesh kaina olamei b'kam shanim. And there's a person that he acquires his world after many years. There's one more tiny piece that concludes this. The Gemara says, Antoninus Shamshel Rebbe. Antoninus served Rebbe for all these years, as it said before. Now, Adrechen, there was another individual which was a Roman minister, Shamshel Rav. He served Rav for many years, similar to Rebbe. Kishachav Antoninus, when Antoninus passed away, Amar Rebbe said, Nispar de Chavila, this Chavila that we were tied together with a special deep love. Rashi actually says, Nafshik. There was a very deep love between them, was separated. That's what Rebbe said when Antoninus passed away. Kishachav Adrechan, when Adrechan passed away, Omar Rav said the same kind of expression, Mispar de Chavila, that love between us was disconnected.